As you were saying, that meditation, it was beautiful. I have a 3.5-year-old that most of you know, and when I pick him up at daycare, he always makes something, and he said, "I made it for you." And I love it when he says, "I made it for you." So when we were saying our meditation, I heard his voice through you saying, "I made it for you." And then your last words were for me, so thank you so much. I'm very, very appreciative. So today I'm going to talk about taking ownership. Don't pay too much attention about the subject of my talk because it only took me 2 minutes to come up with it. I didn't give it a lot of thought. But after I came up with the subject, I went within, and it was during meditation that I heard these words. And then I knew what they were, and I went online to actually find the full verse. And the verse is from the book of the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 11. When I was a child, my speech, my feelings, and thinking were all those of a child. Now that I am a man, I have no more use for childish ways. So I began to ponder what it meant, and I went to my metaphysical Bible dictionary that is this big, and I couldn't find any of those words there. So I thought, okay, I'll give my own metaphysical interpretation. And I believe most of us in unity hold the belief that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And when I try to give metaphysical meaning to this verse and think about the word child, I don't really believe that it is referring to actual children, because I know that children are more in tune with their divine than a lot of us adults. So let me read this Bible passage to you again. When I was a child, my speech, feelings, and thinking were all those of a child. Now that I am a man, I have no more use for childish ways. The way I interpret this is when I was more spiritually asleep, my speech, feelings, thinking, actions were all those of a human that is asleep. As I began to awake to my spirituality, I have learned to diminish some of my human ways. So the more I become one with God, the more my divine flows. And I know the oneness concept, and I am very familiar with it, but am I really living it? I recently presented a talk to BJ, to my disciples group, and I got good feedback, and I also got constructive feedback. And the feedback that I got was that I was presenting God like He was out there. And it really got me thinking. It really got me thinking, because if I am so familiar with this concept and the oneness, why am I referring to Him or her as over there and not here? So I thought it was very, very positive, and it really, really got me thinking. Because the more I become one with my God, with my divine, helps me to diminish my human ways. So I was working out the other day in the morning, which I almost never do, and I turned on the TV, and I put the news, and I thought, is this really, after 5 minutes of listening, I thought, is this really how I want to start my day? Hearing about the killings and the economy and all that negativity out there. So I just changed the channel. And the other day, I went to work and I forgot my cell phone. So as I was walking out, I reached and I knew I didn't have it. And I thought, I'm forced to spend quality time with myself. Every time I go out to lunch, I work in a very small office, so I always have lunch by myself. And I immediately reach and I start calling. So the entire hour between chewing and speaking, I don't know who I am. And I thought, man, when I want to go within, I have to make almost an appointment. So I say, I'm going to meditate at 8:30, or Chris, do you want to pray with me at 10, or whatever. But I make an appointment, which I think is good. However, what happens during the rest of the day, I realized when I didn't have my cell phone, I realized that throughout the rest of my day, my mind is just doing life. Kids, cooking, working, and the few minutes that I have to myself, I don't necessarily invest in me. So it really, really, really got me thinking that yes, I want to go get closer, but I also want to do something about it. Not every free time escape. So knowing that helps me get closer to God in the journey that I'm seeking for. So the journey that I am seeking for has also taken me to this responsibility thing, taking ownership. Taking responsibility is very challenging, at least for me. This is not easy to do. And sometimes I am not aware of my thoughts, feelings, and actions until it's too late. So today I am going to share two personal stories that have played an important part in my path to taking ownership. When I got married 14 years ago, my mother-in-law welcomed me with open arms. I came from Mexico and straight to Massachusetts, so I was not familiar with the area. And I thought that it would be good if we lived with her for 2 weeks while we find together our own place. And as we were looking for our own place, we realized that my mother-in-law had a different agenda. And she told my husband, before you leave, I want to remind you that when you moved to California, I helped you with this expense, and I bought a bed for you, and when you got married, I also paid for this, and that, so I would like for you to pay me before you leave. So of course, I was not working, and we didn't have a lot of money. So the 2 weeks turned into 7 months. And this request was really a shock to us, because when she purchased those things, it was never understood that he or we were going to have to pay back for that. So those 7 months and the months to follow, or I should say the years to follow, were extremely challenging for me personally and for my marriage. I'm not going to get into any details on how bad things turned between my husband and I, or between, her name is Joan, between Joan and I. It doesn't matter what happened or how it happened. All you need to know is that I was so angry and miserable. I clearly didn't have it easy, but I didn't handle the situation well. I became blind to the beauty of life. I was very depressed and so focused on how much of a victim I was, on how bad I had it. I called my family every day with a detail and proof of how bad I had it, so they could believe me. So every day I had a new story to share. And I want to make sure that they understood my pain. And we all know how this works, right? The more attention you pay, the bigger it gets, the better it gets. It could get better, right? But in my case, it was getting a little bit different. So things were so bad internally that, of course, I was seeing somebody at that point, but I would privately have internal conversations with Joan. And I realized that at every moment that I had, I was having a conversation. I was driving, and after a few minutes, I would realize that I'm driving and holding the wheel and moving my hands. I'm having a conversation with her, and very, very animated conversations. And I also had those conversations with my husband, but with him, they were very real and very, very animated. So it was not imaginary, that part. So things got really bad. I was feeling sorry for myself, and I used to write down things, like something would happen, and I would write it down. If I had a little piece of paper, I remember once I found a yellow piece of paper, and I looked at it, and I started reading, and it was one of my stories, and I thought, oh my God, that's scary. But I wanted to make sure that I was not going to forget. I wanted to make sure that I was not going to forget how miserable and how many bad things were happening to me.
Wow.
So luckily, this experience eventually made me examine my relationship with God, my relationship with my religion, and my relationship with myself. As I started to look for answers, my spirituality started to awaken little by little. You know, we are all spiritual people. We are all spiritual, but some are more spiritual or connected than others. So it took some time, however, for me to realize that nothing was done to me. She didn't do anything to me.
Amen.
I just simply gave my power away. So I now come to realize that my thoughts create feelings, and those feelings are expressed in actions. So looking back now, I realize that I gave so much power away to my mother-in-law. On some level, I gave her permission to enter my chamber of mind and let her control the events of my life, as opposed to controlling the way I saw things and change my destiny through the power of my thought. I wish 14 years ago I had some of the tools that I have now, but I didn't. I never completely blamed her, but I did fully blame my husband. Never once took responsibility for my actions or my feelings. I never once stopped to think, what part of myself do I wish to experience now in the face of this calamity? Because believe me, at the time, that was a huge, big calamity for me. What aspect of being do I choose to call forth? All events merely present themselves as opportunities for us to decide and be who we want to be. This is true for every soul. Well, I didn't know that. Or I should say, I didn't remember that. So now, let's not judge John. Let's not judge my husband. And certainly, let's not judge me. As you don't know what we plan to experience before embarking on this early journey. The way I see things now, I didn't take ownership. I didn't take responsibility. I acted as a victim, and I became one. Now I see things through a different lens. Could it be possible that my mother-in-law and I were very loving souls, and before entering in this journey, we made a decision to come into this life to co-create in this way, so she could teach me or push me in a very indirect way to learn the things that I needed to learn?
Yes.
While I still don't have a relationship with her, I am very, very grateful for the role she played in my life. A good part of who I am today is because of that relationship, the relationship that we had and the experiences that we shared. But I was not able to recognize this until I took my power back and made the decision of not being a victim anymore. It is not easy to own your part. Believe me, it is not easy to own it. But once I did, it left the heaviness in my heart And it was replaced, I wish I could say by love, but it was replaced by freedom. I do have a lot of love. I do have a lot of love. I am love. But this particular heaviness was replaced by freedom. I guess what I'm trying to say is, when I entertain the notion that there is something or somebody doing it to me, I disempower myself to do anything about it. Only when I say, I did this, or I allow this, I can find the power to change it. I took responsibility of my feelings, many years later, of course, but somehow I gained control. I gained power over my emotions, my situations. I'm so thankful for the experience, because I learned a lot, and now I have a very strong marriage with a different man. I'm just kidding. Is my marriage perfect? Not at all. Not at all. We have to work on it all the time. But it is wonderful indeed. You see, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yes.
I think it was Dr. Wayne Dyer who said this. And this sentence, when you apply it properly in your life, it really, really can make big changes in your life. So I'm going to read a paragraph that I love from a book called Conversations with God, that probably you all read already. But that book really, really, really helped me with my situation. Do not assume that a soul which has incarnated in a body which you call limited has not reached its full potential. For you do not know what that soul was trying to do. You do not understand its agenda. You are unclear as to its intent. Therefore, bless every person and every situation, and always give thanks. Sometimes it takes us years to realize that what we thought it was a course is really a blessing. So, as of 3 weeks, this talk was going to be about ask, seek, knock. And I prayed for guidance on my talk. I opened up my Bible and I opened Matthew chapter 7, verses 7, ask, seek, knock. And when I presented this to my group, Ron Blickney happened to be here. And before that presentation, he mentioned something about taking responsibility. So when he said that, something inside me clicked. And I just knew, after giving my talk, I had to change my talk. I had to talk about what I'm talking today. And I realized that the ask, seek was really for me, not for the congregation. I asked and I received the answer, but I only received the answer when I was ready to receive it. So when Ron said what he said about taking responsibility, not only something clicked inside of me, but it transported me to an incident that happened a year ago. I have a lot of quality time with my family, but I don't necessarily have quality time with my husband because we're always busy. Between work, the kids' life, we're always busy. So this day, Chris was near my office, and he called me and invited me out to lunch, and I was so excited because I was going to have quality time with him. And we had a wonderful low-key lunch. As we were about to finish, this father was very, very angry, and he was yelling at his son in front of everyone. So of course we all looked, and his son was probably 14, 15 years old, and he was facing down. He was so embarrassed. He was so humiliated. And the father was so furious, and he kept going on, yelling at him in front of everyone. I said to my husband, we have to do something. And my husband, being the gentle soul that he is, he said, there's nothing we can do. That's none of her business. You don't know what's going on there. So I couldn't take it anymore, and I said, let's go. So as we got up, instead of heading to the exit, I went straight to this man, and I said, I could barely talk because I had a big knot. I could barely talk, and I said, you have no right. You have no right for treating anyone like that. I listened to you, and you made me feel horrible. You have no right. And he lowered his face, and he said, you're right. And I left that place almost running. I left behind my husband. We were driving separate cars anyway. I almost ran like a little girl. And I went to my car, and I was crying and crying and crying. And I never understood why I felt the way I felt, why it affected me so much. And maybe I was the one that had no right to go to that man and tell him how he needed to behave. Maybe I was the one that really didn't have that right. So that always bothered me. For the entire year, here and there, I think about that incident, and it still affects me. And I wonder what happened, why it affected me so much. So when Ron said we need to take responsibility, it really clicked in me, the answer. What really happened is I saw that man, and I saw myself reflected there. You see, I have my little Isabella, and I get very angry at sometimes. I don't humiliate her, I don't treat her like that, but I nevertheless get very, very angry. And that's a year later. I took responsibility, I took ownership, and I realized what I saw was myself there. And it was very painful, and it was very, very helpful. It was very, very helpful. It's not easy to take responsibility. It is not easy. It is helpful. However, to go within, to try to think about what's going on in our lives, even if it happened many years ago, if you really want the answer, go within. And when you're ready, the answer will be revealed. But it's very important for us to take ownership. The journey to taking responsibility in my life has been a long one, and it has not been easy. I will continue to do the best I can to take more and more ownership of my life each day. I still have moments where I get caught up in the challenges of life, where I forget that thoughts create my feelings, and my feelings are expressed through my actions. The times that I am not able to take responsibility or ownership are the times that I am disconnected from Source. I am disconnected from my divine. I have learned that when I forgive someone, it's about me, not the other person. When I take responsibility of my actions, I am releasing other people from the impossible task of making me feel happy. Taking responsibility means that only I, and only I alone, can control my destiny. When I was a child, my speech, feelings, and thinking were all those of a child. Now that I am a grown-up, I have learned to diminish my human ways. I'm still trying, but I am moving towards spirit. Thank you for being here today. God bless you all.